All right. All right. It's the Lex Pinz and Pete show. It's a draft night special. At this point, we are now 3 picks into the first round. We'll dive into that shortly. We actually just had a pick take place as we were starting to record. We've got Friends Who Gamble draft expert Tyler Amaral on the show. He's coming on shortly. He's going to go over his big board. We'll cover Slippery Pete's mock draft. And we're also going to get some live in-draft reactions. Hopefully, we get another pick or 2 or 3 going while we're recording. But first, let's get a word from our sponsors, starting with Sundog Multimedia. The Lex Pinz and Pete show is brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Give them a follow on Instagram. That's at Sundog_multimedia, at Sundog, SUNDOG, _multimedia, MULTIMEDIA. Sundog's an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved to something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact one's lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you, build and execute a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. One more thing, Sundog Multimedia is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Moving, muscle for hire, assembly, errands, you name it, they will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. Easy peasy. Need something? Just ask. All right, we'll start with me. I just got back from a vacation in Aruba. I don't know how often you guys travel, but have you gone through airport security recently? Have you heard about this? I was randomly selected for a screening, and I got to tell you, the pat down I received would have made Deshaun Watson blush. Credit where it's due. Security's just trying to keep all travelers safe, and they did a thorough job of checking every body cavity for weapons. But seriously, after the inspection I received, I won't have to visit the proctologist anytime soon. The good news is that I'm not a terrorist. The bad news is that I have 6 months to live. Pete, let's start with you. We have mock draft 3.0 coming out. We're going to get into that. We are 3 picks in right now. You are 1 for 3 to start the mock draft. You claim that you sniffed out my smoke screen. You did mention it in your mock draft. You still kind of fell for it. I just wanted to sabotage your mock draft a little bit. What's your reaction to the first 3 picks of our draft?
I mean, the first 3 picks, like I had Breece 1, everyone had Breece 1, makes sense. I had Drake London 2, Kenneth 3. I thought your smoke screen, I sniffed it out from the beginning. I made it known I sniffed it out from the beginning. Nothing comes straightforward from you when it comes to Dynasty Fantasy Football, but I thought there would be a bigger egg on my face if you actually did take London and I didn't put it there. But the initial lean was Walker. Simcoe honestly got in my head, talked me off the edge. I changed it to London on the mock, but either way, Kenneth 2, Kenneth 3, London 2, London 3. I was right around that. I was right around that edge. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm at 100% accuracy.
Yeah, you're 3 for 3 with players. It does, it made me, it was a fun game for me. It makes me a little happy knowing that I single-handedly guaranteed that you couldn't get the perfect mock, but it is what it is. George, how are things with you?
They're excellent. Besides the fact that I couldn't figure out how to get something running in my code for like the past 4 hours, and then the Celtics lost, so it's been a rough couple of hours, but at least I ended up figuring out my code, unlike the Celtics.
Yeah, that's
so good. But I have some draft thoughts. I actually do have some draft thoughts today, so I'm excited to jump into this one.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna let Tyler in, and then we can just get right into his big board talk.
I'm fired up. Fired up.
Oh, Pete, don't give him the Joker smile.
I'm excited, man. This is my season.
Tyler, how's it going?
What's up, boys? How you doing?
What up?
Good. How's the family? How are the dogs? How are they doing?
Dogs are paying my ass, but the kids are good.
I feel that. That's great. It's great to hear. All right, so we got Tyler Amaral here. Tyler, I call him the league draft expert. I always trust his opinion. He's a MIAA expert. I don't know if he's heard of Slippery Pete. We got formerly known as Alex Aruri. He was QB1 for ORR for a little bit. His ACLs weren't too kind to him. I don't know if you ever covered him back in his day, but he's a good contributor on the show. He also works on our draft coverage. So I'm glad to have both of you guys on. Slippery Pete's
Yeah, I mean,
always on the show.
all SEC wide receiver and quarterback, junior, senior year, both ACLs, no big deal. That's behind me. I'm moving on to my true passion now, Tyler, which I've just recently discovered is a true love for dynasty fantasy football, and more specifically, the draft. I mean, I did 43 mock drafts on the Sleeper app over the last 3 months. I mean, this is something I look at for at least an hour every single night. So needless to say, I'm fired up right now.
Hey, just one thing. Let me know if any spots come up. I'm in exactly 0 dynasty leagues, so I need in on it.
I know it killed me when you said that to me when I first reached out about getting you on the show. It killed me because we had just filled a couple spots, and I wish I knew. I wish I could have had you on the list, but you are, I'd say, certainly number one on the wait list. And who knows?
Yeah, a lock. 30 seconds into the first episode, you're already a lock for the next spot.
Yeah, no, we'd love to bring you in. But all right,
We have a
so
pretty high
we also got
turnover
two
rate,
pins
so.
here. George, you want to introduce yourself as well?
2 Pinz, defending champion. But that's obviously behind us. Draft is here, so that's what we've been focusing on. We just taking it day by day and trying to put together another ring.
Perfectly said, as always. All right, so we brought Tyler on. We just want to talk about his Superflex big board. So I asked him to come up with his top 15 players. I feel like that kind of covers everybody that we should be looking at around the first round, barring any kind of obscene reaches. So I'll just start. I'll go right from the top, and we can kind of look at it, parallel to our rookie draft right now that's going on. So, Tyler, we're 3 picks in. So far, we've had Breece Hall go number 1, Kenneth Walker go number 2. That was my pick. And then Drake London just went number 3. He was the first receiver off the board. So I'll start at the top of your board. So starting at number 1, going to 15, we got Breece Hall, Traylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Sky Moore, Drake London at 5, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Kenny Pickett, Kenneth Walker III, Jahan Dotson at 10, James Cook, George Pickens, Pierre Strong, Zamir White, and Malik Willis at 15. So what sticks out to me right away, I'd say, is the fact that we have Breece Hall, who I'd say is 100% the consensus number 1 pick here, followed by 6 receivers before we start getting to quarterbacks or our RB2. I think kind of inside of that tier with the receivers, we can start looking at it because I think the rankings are interesting as well. So going from 2 to 7, that's the wide receiver 1 through 6. You got Burks, Wilson, Moore, London, Olave, Jamison Williams. I think Traylon Burks, he's definitely been discussed as a wide receiver 1, especially after the pick. You look at it as he's being drafted to fill that A.J. Brown role. He's got an immediate path to that. And I think that the talent with these receivers is so close that those types of picks, that type of situation that people land in makes them more desirable. Wilson, obviously, too. Sky Moore, I think, was an interesting one that you had ranked 4th overall, wide receiver 3. I'm assuming that it has a lot to do with where he went in the draft, going to Kansas City. But what do you think of Sky Moore? What else? Are there any other reasons you have him ranked so high?
No, I mean, I think Sky Moore was a great prospect coming into the draft this year. I mean, I wanted the pass to take him, but I couldn't, that's besides the point. But I think that's a perfect fit with him and Mahomes. The offense. So we're Kansas City, like people think that Kansas City's automatically going to slip because Tyreek Hill's gone, but I don't really agree with that. Like a lot of times last year when the offense was struggling, it's because they were trying too hard to force a ball downfield when teams were playing the 2 deep safety, right? So like, I think they're going to play more underneath stuff this year and moving forward. So I think Sky Moore matched up for at least 4 years with Mahomes. That's why I have him that high.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, right? Because I know that I've seen some comparisons to kind of how McCole Hardman and like Byron Pringle, and I'm sure I'm missing a third receiver there, but how they've kind of come in and they kind of had a little bit of hype just because they got picked up from Kansas City and they didn't really pan out. But I do think that it changes with Tyreek gone, right? Because I had Clyde on my team last year and I liked him a lot. I thought he was pretty good his rookie year. And I think that he kind of got a bad rap last year. He was dealing with injuries, all that type of stuff. But whenever I'd watch the Chiefs, I'd always notice how he'd be like wide open in the flat. But Mahomes isn't looking there, right? It's like his first 3 looks, I'd say 4 looks are Hill, Kelsey, and then back to Hill and Kelsey if they're not open right away. But I think now that Hill's away, and then Kelsey, he's still going to get his share, but he's also getting older too. They're seeming to kind of stack the room now, so maybe that'll get Mahomes looking around, and that might actually be better for some of these second, third receivers, and they might not have that true wide receiver one potential, but it's definitely going to be competitive in fantasy, and I think it'll be interesting to see if Sky Moore can kind of step in and kind of claim a lot of those targets that are being left behind, or if he'll kind of fall into the mix. But I think it's interesting, and he wasn't a guy I'd really been looking at. I do agree with you. I thought it would be cool. I liked him, and some of the other later round guys, or second round guys that we saw possibly going to the Pats. Would have been nice to take at least one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sky too. He's that offense, right? Like Hardman's going into the last year of his deal. Juju's just on a 1-year deal. So like moving forward, it could just be him and MVS. And I like Moore's chances there. I don't know if MVS is ever going to hit a ceiling that maybe people have put out for him.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, he's now in a position where, like I said, with Kelsey getting older too, he's going to be gone eventually. It kind of is his kind of his opportunity to take. So we'll see. I know Pete. I know you're. I don't know. I think you had him ranked as like your wide receiver 7, but you still had him going pretty high in our first round. I think in the top 10, right? What do you think of Sky? Do you like him here at 4? Where do you rank him amongst maybe these other top tier receivers that we've seen?
I mean, the difference between what we got going on with Tyler here and what I did is I did a mock draft based off positional needs in the league.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm analyzing rosters and picking wide receivers based off roster need. I'm also got my ear to the streets. You know what I mean? Like I'm texting this league every night on my hour a night grind, seeing where they're leaning, who do they like. I'm mocking based off what I'm hearing, and my input on talent. Tyler's got the big board here, which I'll tell you what I'm not surprised about and what I am surprised about. What I'm not surprised about is 2 through 7, right? So Burks, Wilson, Moore, London, Olave, Williams. I think anyone who has a shred of dynasty knowledge that looked at this draft can probably make a case for all 5 of these wide receivers in any different order. Like wide receiver 1 through 6 is kind of wide open. So I think like coming out of this draft, there's going to be some people who look like geniuses and get a steal. Like who knows? Maybe Wilson drops to 7 or 8. Maybe he's the best wide receiver in this draft. Mm-hmm. And there's some people who look like idiots. Like maybe Igor just took Drake London at 1-3. Like, I mean, he could be you just don't know. So these wide receivers are mixed. That doesn't surprise me. I don't really see I don't have any strong leans in terms of the order of the wide receivers. But what does surprise me is 2 names. Malik Willis at 15.
Hey, we'll get there. All right. We'll get
all right.
Yeah, save it. Yeah, George, I'm going to take it to you though, because I want to get your thoughts on this tier of wide receivers, because I know that you like Williams. I know that you like Olave. You've talked, you said really good things about them kind of leading up to the draft and everything. Tyler has them ranked at wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. That's 6th and 7th overall still. I think they're all in agreement that this tier of receivers, they could really pan out anyway, and it kind of comes down to personal preference. But, the 2 guys that I know that you like are kind of ranked at the bottom 2 of this tier. And I know that you hated that London pick at 3 overall as well. So what's your overall opinion of this receiver class?
Yeah. So for me, it's Williamson. And then for me, it was Williamson and Olave going into the draft. And then it was, break tier, everybody else.
Who's Williamson, George?
I'm sorry?
Williams. Jameson Williams.
Williams.
All right.
So it was those 2. It was Williams and Olave for me, and then a break, and then the rest of the receivers going into this draft. I didn't love where Olave ended up, so I kind of downgraded him there a little bit. Obviously James is going to let the ball fly, but I don't know what the offense is going to look like without John Payton there. I think Williams is far and away the best receiver in this draft, and I think that him going to the Lions is actually a really good position for him, because I think that he already is in an offense with a lot of weapons, like legitimate weapons. Amon Ra, he's got Swift, Hawkinson. So, and a quarterback that is somewhat capable. I mean, he's a bad quarterback, but he's
and I'd say that they're also positioning themselves to get a quarterback next year as well. So
yeah, I think a lot of teams this year were.
Yeah, I think that explains it, right? With this huge drop that we saw, it was kind of like, I mean, wasn't that kind of like a monumental drop as far as how many picks he went behind where he was projected, right?
Well, I'm hot about Malik, so let me know when you want me to get it.
Yeah, no, we'll get there. So we'll move down the list now, though. I think, like I said, we're all in agreement. I think that these wide receiver 1 through 6, I think they're pretty much they were so comparable in kind of talent and testing and everything that a lot of it did kind of, when you're splitting hairs, it really came down to kind of where they ended up. And also when you're drafting, where your team's at, right? Maybe a team that is looking to win right away, they might go after a guy like Burks or a guy like London, who have this like immediate path to so many targets. But a rebuilding team, they might be more interested in a guy like Williams, who isn't going to be starting right away just because of the ACL. Might come in like a month. It sounds like if he's really lucky, coming like a month early and all that. But I mean, I like a guy like Williams too. I like what they're building in Detroit. Moving on to number 8, we got our QB1 on the board. We got Kenny Pickett. We'll stop there for now, just so we can talk about Pickett. And you know what? I'll also we can bring in Malik here too, because I know that Pete's got something to say, and he's the only other quarterback on the list. Tyler, what are your overall thoughts on this quarterback class? I know personally, I wasn't very high on their talent, but I'm also kind of surprised that Malik fell like that, and that he's clearly viewed as a guy that is, at least a year away from starting, barring a Tannehill injury or something. And could be 2, I mean, maybe even more than that, if he ever really gets that chance to start. But what's your overall opinion on this QB class, especially Pickett, who ended up in, I'd say, the most favorable position with Pittsburgh out of all the teams that we thought were going to go quarterback? A lot of those teams ended up just not going quarterback at all. So yeah, what do you think about Pickett, Willis, and I don't know, maybe anybody else that you want to throw in there?
Yeah, man, I'm not big on this class at all. I haven't liked this quarterback class all the way through the NFL draft process. Pickett, basically, I have him as QB1 easily because he's the one that's
like by
almost guaranteed starts this year. I would be surprised if he doesn't start at least 10 games. I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to beat out Trubisky and start week 1. So, I think the weapons around him too, Deontay, Claypool, Pickens, Freiermuth, Najee, like that. He had a lot of weapons around him. So I think his floor is pretty high, and that's like, you could say that about him as an NFL prospect, and then also as a fantasy player. Like, I think he has a decent floor. I just don't know how much you're going to get out of the ceiling. A little bit of rushing upside there too. So that's why I have Pickett as QB1. Willis as QB2 just because of his upside. He has more upside, especially with that rushing production, more upside than any other quarterback in the class. So that's why I would have him at number 2. No other quarterback really does it for me. I mean, we might see like Corral make some starts this year. I think he's better than Sam Darnold right now. He might get in there a couple times this year.
Ritter
again, that's his is all system based. If he doesn't get an RPO based system, I don't think he stands much of a chance.
Yeah, I think those other guys, right? Corral, Ritter, Howell.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's anybody else I'm missing. Like, I feel like one of those guys might succeed, but there's like no telling which one it's going to be, right? It's like you can draft them, but it's kind of draft at your own risk and hope that you kind of hit the lottery and you pick the right one. I mean, they are in interesting positions where they have the opportunity to win the job, but I think it's pretty clear that besides the Steelers, all these other teams are just kind of punting and, looking in the future. They figure the QB is just kind of a later problem for them. Pete, what do you got to say? I know that you've been big on Willis all throughout the process. I think, maybe your argument might have taken a little bit of a blow after he dropped so far on draft night. But I know that you're still high on him regardless. And it's still an interesting situation in Tennessee, right? I mean, Tannehill's not going to be there forever. I know that the fans personally want him gone. So maybe we do see Willis faster than it seems. But still definitely a little concerning that he went from being a projected like top 7 pick to going, the 4th round? Pete, where are you standing at that now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 2 years looking at this dynasty perspective now, Tyler. So what I'll say is I say talent over situation, right? So throughout this entire process, there was no doubt of the talent Malik Willis had. Everyone was all about this upside. And then as soon as the NFL teams passed on him, everyone reacted and passed on him too. I just don't get it. I still believe in the talent. I still believe in the player. And even you look at the position, Tannehill, I did the math. Titans would eat $10.3 million next year if they cut Tannehill, which is not that big of a deal, especially if Malik Willis shows some promise this year. I think Malik Willis is going to be a steal. He's going to be a steal in this draft. He could start next year, the year after. I'm personally am a rebuilding team, Tyler. So like I am looking at a couple of years out. But I look at his floor like Jalen Hurts. Like we saw Jalen Hurts last year. I don't know what he was, but he was probably top 10, right? Like
yeah, I think he's like
he was like top 5 in fantasy scoring.
Yeah,
because like
that's
he's the
wrong.
he's a horrible NFL quarterback. He might be good
That's
this year.
wrong.
He's got weapons, but
That's wrong.
George, relax.
Sorry, keep going.
Jalen Hurts could throw 2 picks, throw for 150 yards, 1 touchdown, but he's still going to put 60 yards on the ground and probably run for a score 2, get you 20, 25 fantasy points. That's kind of the floor I saw Malik Willis as. If he gets that starting role, that running ability is like unvalued in dynasty fantasy football. And then his ceiling is like Lamar Jackson, has that running ability. If he develops his arm, like all these coaches are saying that he's not NFL ready yet. But I think you give him a year or two. Titans are ready to move on from Tannehill. $10.3 million next year is not that much to eat. I get the fall, but not the drastic fall. I mean, I think his average draft position now is like mid-second round. We're taking backs like Zamir White over him in the second round. And I don't know. I don't see it. I see the upside translating to dynasty fantasy football success. And if it's a miss at 2-1, I happen to have the 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 2-4, I'm okay with that. I think it's a great buy for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting argument, and obviously with dynasty, there's an aspect of going and getting your guys. So it looks like you were thinking maybe you'd be lucky to get him at the 8th pick. You might be able to get him in the 3rd round now. So you can kind of shop in the bargain bin, and you can get Malik Willis, right, Pete? So that's good for you, and you can kind of end up with what you always wanted. That's great. George, what do you think about these quarterbacks? I feel like we've kind of covered everything. We know how you feel, and kind of where you stand in that debate. I don't know if you have any other comments on it though.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kenny Pickett. I came in thinking that he's a backup, but honestly, the arguments made by Tyler I could see him being in a decent enough situation. Malik Willis can't play in the NFL, and the comparison to Jalen Hurts is disrespectful. And putting him in the Lamar Jackson tier that's literally crazy. That's somebody who I don't know if they've watched any Malik Willis.
Put him in the tier, George. I said that's his ceiling.
No, that's crazy. You have not watched any Malik Willis if you
when Bo Nix makes you transfer, so you can start, it's a red flag for me. That's personally how I feel. That's just
crazy.
It's just,
but both of these quarterbacks, I think Malik was properly rated, and I do think that there is something to be said for and I think I said this to you when we took Strange. There's something to be said for the NFL people knowing what's going on, and I know that you can say like they might not have any clue, but they obviously have more information and more people that do this for a living. So if he went in the 3rd round, then maybe the talent that all the fans thought he had isn't actually as high as we think it is, and that's why he's going in the 3rd round. Because if he really had the talent that we thought, like if he had the fan talent and it was verified, then he wouldn't have gone in the 3rd round.
Kind of makes me wonder what NFL information had on guys like Dak Prescott, guys like Russell Wilson.
Name some other 3rd, 4th round quarterbacks.
No, sure I had those two prepared for this argument. That's all I got.
All right. We'll move on from quarterbacks. We'll kind of lump these together. I mean, we'll go over Kenneth Walker too. So you had him 9th. He's the RB2, Tyler. What do you think is the gap between Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker?
I think it's pretty substantial just because Seattle's kind of unpredictable. I mean, Pete might be coming to the end of the road there, but like Penny's still on the roster. I don't think Carson's ever going to play in the NFL again.
No, I think he's definitely done.
Yeah. So that kind of explains that pick again. Like Penny's back on a 1-year deal, maybe? Or
I think so.
I think it's a 1-year deal.
I think so.
So I mean, like if we were if you're betting on upside only, like we just talked about, then it's not as substantial as just looking at what we know now and what the floor is. I think Breece is going to come in and he reminds me of Jonathan Taylor. He's not going to get that workload because Michael Carter's there, but he does remind me a little bit of Jonathan Taylor, the way he plays the game. So I like Breece Hall a lot. I thought there was a decent chance he could go round 1. Buffalo, maybe, if they didn't have that need at corner, but
And he was close enough, right? I think it was like the 4th pick of the second or something.
Yeah, he was close.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like Brees a lot, but I think James Cook is closer to Ken Walker than Ken Walker is to Brees. I don't really believe in Ken Walker as a pass catcher. I don't know if that's going to translate at all to the NFL.
Yeah. So I just took him, right? And one, I felt that I had need a running back. Pete thought that I had good depth. I'm very, I wouldn't even say top heavy because I just have good running backs, but I don't really have any bench running backs or anything. So I felt like, I have Swift. So if I could get Walker as well, I kind of like that young duo because I'm somebody that believes in the upside of Kenneth Walker. Because I thought that I felt that he was the best runner in college last year. And I mean, he won the best running back award. What is it? The Dokes Award. Yeah. So, and he just, and I thought, especially I remember watching him in that Michigan game, right? He had 5 touchdowns, I believe. And just like, that was like that moment where I was like, I want to get him on my team. And I believe in the upside with the pass catching just because I don't think that not catching passes in college necessarily means that you were a bad pass catcher. He was in a kind of pro style scheme that was really just focused on handing the ball to the running backs, right? Hold on, let me see. I wrote this down somewhere. Yeah, so they had 5 players on Michigan State with 13 plus carries. One of them was the quarterback. They had 29 total receptions. Kenneth Walker had 13 of those. So like they just did not throw the ball to running backs. It sounds like Pete Carroll is excited about his pass catching ability. The bigger question is more his pass protection. If he can pick that up, that's how he'll be able to get in there on those 3rd downs. And if he can do that, then I think that he can provide as a pass catcher. It's all about picking up the pass protection though. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I also like the opportunity that's there with how they drafted Cross in the 1st round and they drafted that other lineman in the 3rd round. They're clearly trying to bulk up the offensive line. So I think that the opportunity is there, right? Because I'm not afraid of Penny. He had 4 good games at the end of last year. He was going against Houston. He was going against Chicago. He went against Arizona week 17. I forget the fourth game that he did really well on. But
that's the only stretch he's ever had, right?
Yeah, right. And he's been a bum up until then. So I think that he'll still be there, and as long as he can stay healthy, he's going to still be in the mix. But I kind of look at Chris Carson's production when healthy, and he was like a fringe RB1, talking top 12. Just based off of averages. And even with his injuries and the missed games, he was still finishing top 20 with ease. So I think that, and Kenneth Walker is just a much better prospect than Chris Carson ever was. So I like that he can come in here and play for a team that likes to pound the rock. And I think the opportunities will be there. I think that Breece Hall obviously presents the better skills up front, just from what we've seen with his pass catching and his size and everything. But I think that I think Kenneth Walker has an opportunity to end up being just as good, if not a better running back. But obviously that is, relying on some chips to kind of fall my way. George, we'll start with you. What did you think about my pick with Kenneth Walker at number 2? And kind of where do you feel about, like I said, that gap between Breece, Walker, and the running backs in general? And we could bring James Cook. He was ranked number 11th. And then we can get into, I think the last 2 running backs we'll save for later.
Yeah, you got the best running back in this draft, so congratulations. I think people they get a little, and listen, I don't, not to say Breece Hall is not a good player. He'll be a solid back. But I think he's a jag to me, versus, and I really am not saying that to be like disrespectful or have a hot take. I just really don't see like an explosive playmaking, like top tier back. When I look at him more in like the Damian Harris, like tier of like really solid backs, 800 yards, 900-yard guys, that'll be able to catch the ball. I don't love his situation at all. And I don't really understand. Like, I get that the Jets are going to try to run the Kyle Shanahan system. Like, I get it. They have LaFleur. They're going to try to do that, but they're also going to try to establish Zach Wilson as their quarterback. So they're going to have these competing offensive themes, and I don't know how those work together. What I do know about Seattle is they're going to run the ball, and they're going to run the ball some more. And when the run's not working, they're going to run it some more. And so I like the guarantee of touches for my back and a coach whose philosophy is built around that versus a team where I don't really know what they're going to be trying to do. They also did draft a receiver, so they're going to try to feed him. They have other pieces that I just feel like they're going to be trying to get involved. It's not as clear to me what they're going to be doing offensively. So I do really like Kenneth Walker there. And I agree with everything you said about, learning how to catch the ball, and then also not getting too hung up on the running back as a pass catcher, just in the sense that like if you're really an effective runner, and you can get some of those check down passes, if you can even get to that 30 to 40 catch range as a back, then you're going to be a productive fantasy football back. So I do really like Kenneth Walker, and then I like Cook. I think Cook is somebody who is being painted into a role as that kind of like third down scat back, where I think he actually has the potential and the ability to be a four down back that they feed. That one is also dependent on, are we going to see a philosophy shift in Buffalo from, Josh Allen running the ball and basically being like the primary ball carrier to them actually trusting another running back? But I think that there's a chance that that's the case. And if that is, I think Cook is like a very, very boom player for his value where you're going to be able to get him.
Yeah, I think Cook's landing spot was interesting, right? I liked him, and he definitely shot up the rankings just by going to Buffalo. The only thing that concerns me, just from a win now perspective, just kind of where my team's at and how I'm looking at it, is I do get a little bit worried about those goal line opportunities. One, I think that Singletary's still going to get a good chunk of carries, at least for now. They could, obviously phase him out and just look for Cook to be their lead guy in the future. But also you have the rushing factor with Josh Allen, and that's a real issue as far as scoring fantasy points as a running back, is, having a guy that's taking those goal line touches and also just running for 50, 60 yards every game. Or, at least he always, is a threat to do so. But yeah, I mean, I think that Cook's really interesting, especially when you're getting points per reception. I think that he could be really productive right away, and obviously has an opportunity for a bigger role in the future. Pete, what do you think, kind of these second and third running backs, Kenneth Walker, James Cook?
I love Kenneth Walker. I had him as my RB1, same as George. Obviously, I mocked Brees Hall at 1-1 because I knew Nick was taking that pick, but I also had Kenneth as my RB1. Seahawks, top three, third in total rushing yards since 2018. That's with Russell Wilson at quarterback, maybe the tail end of Baldwin, but obviously all of Lockett and mostly DK too. So you got an elite quarterback, elite wide receivers, and you're still top three in rushing yards. And talking about Chris Carson here. So like, I love the pick with Kenneth Walker. George kind of highlighted James Cook. I'm going to take a different approach and highlight Zamir White. Raiders declined to take Josh Jacobs' fifth year. They're clearly moving on from next year. They're not going to pay him a new contract. Kenyon Drake has showed us that he can't hold down a backfield by himself. He's kind of just like a role player. So I think there's a lot of upsides. Zamir White, maybe late second round, mid second round after Malik Willis, but he could own that backfield next year on a great team. So yeah, I like James Cook, but I also think Zamir White's gonna be a steal. I wanted to highlight him.
Yeah, and while we're doing White, might as well cover the other running back on the board. It's Tyler's RB4, and it was his 13th player overall on the big board, Pierre Strong. I love the Pats pick. I'm very excited about that. He looks very exciting.
He's the only pick of the Pats that I like.
Yeah,
he was the only pick I liked throughout the whole draft for the Pats.
Yeah.
I don't trust that James White's going to play this year. So he might have a role immediately, and then it looks like Harris, this is going to be his last year here. So I think you'll see the Pats move forward with Stevenson and Strong as that 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I think that it's like a way that you can buy low in the draft, right? With Pierre Strong, because people are so afraid of Pat's running backs. But when you really look at it, I agree with you on James White, and I've been cool with them kind of letting him, if he wanted to go down to Tampa, play with Brady or retire or anything, like, it's like he's done enough. I feel like we're kind of in this new era of Pats, and not that I'm like kicking him out the door, but I am kind of just ready to move on and bring in these new heads. And I do kind of like the idea of maybe James White taking a step back and we work more people in, but I think that Strong, he is a good option to kind of come in. And he was the one did he run the fastest 40? Yeah, at the combine, right?
Yeah,
so I think that the one thing the Pats are clearly doing is trying to get faster. And I think Pierre Strong, maybe he won't be a year one contributor unless we kind of see how Ramondre kind of fell into that last year, even though he was kind of put in the doghouse right away. But like I said, I think that is kind of a good buy low opportunity, especially when you're looking at early second round pick, and if he kind of starts to drop a little bit. But who knows? We got a lot of Pats fans in this league. I don't know. We got anything else to add on to these running backs? George, do you like the Pierre Strong pick?
Go ahead,
Just
Tyler.
real quick, James Cook, I think that you're putting him in an elite offense from day one. So he's married to Josh Allen and his success and that offensive success from day one.
Yeah.
And like, I look at the moves that teams try to make throughout the offseason, or they do make throughout the offseason. And Buffalo was aggressive in their pursuit of JD McKissick.
Mm-hmm.
And then he backed out and went to Washington. So to me, that says they don't want Singletary anywhere near the third down, passing downs, passing situations, right? So I think that pass game work in an elite pass game is going to go to Cook immediately. Not to mention when he starts getting factored into the run game.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the reasons why I'm pretty high on Cook, is because I think you earn things in the NFL, and I think if he's productive in his role, I think when he comes in, yes, he'll have that role, be the third down guy, be the pass catching guy. But I do think if he's productive in that role, then they're going to give him more opportunities to show himself as a runner, and then at that point, it's just being more talented than Devin Singletary, which I don't think is very difficult. So I think if it's agreed upon that he'll be productive in the pass catching role, then I think it follows that they'll give him some opportunity at least to run the ball, just because it's not like Singletary's that talented where it's like, why not give this guy a look? And if he can capitalize on that role, then I think he'll quickly find himself getting more and more of the work on the ground.
Yeah, and he ended up, he's got that second round draft capital too, so they're clearly high on him. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he gets worked in. And you got to think that at some point they'll look to dial back with the Josh Allen runs, and he's obviously capable of being a good pocket quarterback, just with how his improved accuracy and then also his size, his ability to just kind of stand in there and take hits. So at some point, maybe we'll see it. I mean, people always say that about Lamar Jackson. Obviously, they're similar in how they play, but they're not built the same, and they don't really move the same way. So I don't know if we'll ever see that with Lamar, but yeah, who knows? Maybe Buffalo will try and protect their quarterback and get a little bit more traditional with the run game. There's two more guys that we haven't covered yet. Two receivers, wide receivers 7 and 8. Tyler's got them ranked 10th and 12th. And I think that these are two interesting guys, Jahan Dotson and George Pickens. Dotson, I didn't love the pick right away. I mean, I didn't really like him too much. He was not somebody that I had circled on my personal big board, though I would have acknowledged where he should have been ranked. I didn't have him ranked low. It was more just I wasn't too interested in him compared to the other receivers on the board. And I wasn't exactly thrilled when I saw him go to Washington either, just because Terry McLaurin's so good. But with what we're seeing with these receivers, right? I mean, we just saw what's his name, AJ Brown get traded to Philly. We know that guys like DK they're talking about with contract issues, Debo, and McLaurin's in that class too. So who knows if Terry McLaurin's actually going to be a Washington Commander next year? And Jahan Dotson does have the opportunity to just kind of come in, work as a wide receiver too. We've seen plenty of 2 wide receiver offensives thrive in fantasy, so he could also do that from day one. And then next year he could be looking at being the first option in that passing game. So I think that he's an interesting prospect. And then same with George Pickens, right? Obviously he was dropping because of shit like character concerns. He had injuries in college, but when he was on the field, he was great. And the Steelers, they have a good track record with some of the receivers that they've drafted. So, I think that if the Steelers like him, you got to kind of rank him pretty high. And if he's there, I don't think that he's a guy that breaks into that first half of the first round. But, when you're looking at those picks 7 through 12, he's definitely an interesting name around there. Pete, I know that you're high on George Pickens. What do you think of these last 2 receivers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm high on George Pickens because of Steelers wide receivers. The history's been there. So I'm high on them. But the thing with this wide receiver market is Christian Kirk broke the market. Christian Kirk literally broke the market. The Jags gave him a bag that he didn't deserve, in my opinion. And now we're looking at teams that aren't paying these wide receivers off their rookie deal, letting them walk, and then drafting a guy they feel like we can fit the role. So Washington did that a year early. It took Dotson. Who knows if they're going to sign Terry next year? He's unrestricted free agent, like you said, KB. I don't know. I don't have like a preference between the two. I think they both are I don't know Deontay or Claypool's contract, but I imagine it's up in the next year or two. Either way, I think these are 2 talented wide receivers, kind of in the second tier of wide receivers, but I think it comes down to who has a better quarterback for me. Right now, I think it's Kenny Pickett. Carson Wentz is a bum, but Washington also could be one of those teams that kind of punted on QBs this year and kind of looking at next year at but like also they're not going to be good. They're going to get some wins. Like they're not going to have a shot at Stroud or Young. Maybe like DJ from Clemson or something. But it would come to the quarterback for me at that point. But I mean, those two guys are toss up.
George, you got anything to say about these last two guys?
Well, it's interesting. I think that one receiver, I had two receivers that we didn't mention. So Pickens, yes, Steelers wide receiver, always interesting. Two receivers we didn't mention that I think could be sleepers. Jalen Tolbert went to Dallas, and I think that he could play somewhat of a role in terms of him, CD, and Gallup. I think that there's room for a third receiver there. Just the fact that the amount of production that is leaving with Amari going creates opportunity. And then I do think, as much as I hate Fraud Rogers, I love Christian Watson. I loved Christian Watson coming out. I don't obviously love as much the situation that he's in, just because I don't know if veteran quarterback is going to trust the young wide receiver. But you got to think Tanyan's, is he going to come back this year? You lose Devontae. They have nobody to throw the ball to, and I think Christian Watson is actually a very good big body receiver. So I like the potential there for him to actually come on. Probably will be a second half of the year type of guy, because I think the first half is going to be gaining that trust. But he's somebody that I think if you can get him later, he's going to develop into a player.
Yeah, and before we pass it back to Tyler, I like the Tolbert shout out. One thing, right? Gallup, he got that extension, right? But when you really look at the terms, he's not getting paid like that. I'm looking at it, he's making like 10 million a year on that extension. That's really not a huge commitment, especially with some of the money that we've seen come out for these receivers, like you said, Pete, Christian Kirk. So I don't think that Gallup is necessarily set in stone as that wide receiver 2 next to CD. He could be somebody that maybe they look to trade. He's a cheap contract. Maybe they just keep him on, but they're also looking to kind of build up and bring in some competition for that second role. So I like Tolbert as well. That's obviously more of a project player that you kind of hope pans out. I don't know about his day one production necessarily. Yeah, Tyler, what do you think about Dotson, Pickens, and then if there's anybody else that you want to shout out?
Yeah, just quick, Tolbert too. Like he like you said, he's more of a project, but he might produce September, October this year. He might give you some spike games too. Gallup's coming off the knee injury, so I don't know what's going on there. He just has to beat out James Washington, so which is pretty much the only receiver Pittsburgh has a hit on is James Washington. Yeah. And he's their track record is the reason why I have Pickens this high. I trust that they'll be able to, when Kevin Colbert likes and identifies a receiver he wants, especially on day 2, then that player most likely can play. And so a lot of it does come down to Pickett, but I think there's some useful fantasy production there, especially when based on if Deontay leaves or Claypool leaves, in the coming years. And then Jahan, I think you might be able to get some flex value out of him year 1. I'm thinking more McLaurin's going to be gone after this year, and either or there's going to be a quarterback upgrade, and they're going to you'll be able to throw the ball vertically more. I think Dotson's a really good. I think Dotson got a lot of juice, and he's going to have some spike weeks as well. He might go for 4 and 120 and a touchdown a couple of times throughout the year.
Yeah, and I like Dotson. Yeah, I think like what we're saying about McLaurin being gone, I think it could be very similar to what we're seeing in Baltimore, right? Where it looked like it was Hollywood Brown, and then they drafted I'm blanking on his name now.
Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman. And it was just kind of like, all right, what's really the pathway for Bateman, right? Because Mark Andrews is obviously the first option. Then you got Hollywood. He's Lamar's best friend, and he's obviously been a really good deep threat for him too. But now all of a sudden he's gone. And now Rashad Bateman, he is the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore. And even though it might not be the sexiest pass offense, like there you have it, right? There's all those targets that he can get. And I feel like Dotson kind of be a similar player there. And, he's mocked to kind of go around the same place that Bateman went. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. I don't know. Do you got anybody else any honorable mentions before we let you go?
If we're talking Green Bay rookies, I think that I would go with the more polished of the two, more of a sleeper. I would go with Romeo Doubs personally before I touch Christian Watson. I'm not a fan of Christian Watson at all. maybe he proves me wrong, but I don't like the real, they have all the traits, but haven't really put it on the field. I tried to stay away from those guys. So I'd go with somebody that's more polished and produced over a longer period of time. And that's, Dubs played in Nevada, but again, that's a step up in competition from what Watson was playing against.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was the name that I found interesting too. It's like, I feel like everybody was so fixated on Watson, and obviously because of where he went. But yeah, I think that Dubs he's an impressive guy too. And like you said, he's more polished. He comes from a bit stronger of a program. Not that Nevada is some powerhouse, but it is a step up in terms of D1 competition. And yeah, I mean, I think that he could be interesting. I don't think that Watson's necessarily a lock to just kind of step in and be great. But obviously there were just so many targets available in Green Bay that I feel like it's worth taking a shot on at least one of those guys, and hoping one of them hits, because it's still Rodgers throwing the ball, and a lot of targets are gone now that Devontae's out of there. So yeah.
Yeah. Then quickly, I got to mention my favorite prospect in the draft. I love Wandale Robinson. The receiver room in New York's a little crowded, but I trust Daboll as an offensive mind to be able to incorporate him.
Crowded with
if not this year, then next year.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. I remember he was a guy that I was always seeing in these mocks, and he was kind of in around that area where I was like hoping that the Pats might take a guy. So I mean, yeah, it's kind of like there's all these guys in that receiver room, like you said, but somebody's got to kind of just reach up and grab the brass ring, right? And somebody's got to claim those targets. Did they have any touchdowns thrown to receivers last year in New York? But
yes, it is.
I don't know if they did. But
I don't know what's going on with Tony. Like, are they going to trade him already? But
yeah, right.
The story there.
Yeah, but I'm really interested to see what Daboll can do, because, like, I mean, he obviously is. He's shown what he can do with good offenses, and if he can kind of bring that scheme down there, it will be interesting. I don't think that he necessarily wants to do it with Daniel Jones, but that's another team that could be looking quarterback later on. But yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in that New York situation and seeing kind of how it pans out. I think it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but if you can land it there, I mean, somebody's going to succeed there eventually. So I think that'll be interesting. But
one quick thought on the receivers. I do think that moving forward, I think this receiver class is really going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, in terms of, like, you were talking about, like, maybe Terry McLaurin being gone. You have Deebo Samuel situation in the air. I think that a lot of that was predicated on this idea that, you can find basically a wins above replacement in the draft. And so you have the Titans experimenting with that this year. I think that, like, the production of this class will lead to a lot of, what happens in the next offseason, which could impact, if you're planning on Terry McLaurin being gone, then you're really hoping that these receivers are good. And that, I think, will lead to more teams being like, yeah, I could just find a receiver. I'm not going to pay this guy. But I think if, these receivers are not, there's no Jamar Chase, there's no Justin Jefferson. If they're just, guys, and it goes back to kind of regressing to the mean of one pops, the rest of them are pretty much duds. I think you'll see a lot of teams be like, yeah, you're right. You don't just trade a Terry McLaurin when you draft one, or you don't just trade a Deebo Samuel off of your team. So I think that this receiver class is really important for, what teams do moving forward when they get a guy that's young and really good.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, okay, Tyler, we can leave it there. I don't want to keep it too long. So that's Tyler Amaral. He's at Tyler Amaral 22 on Twitter. You do some writing, right?
Yeah, I do a little bit of writing for Enterprise newspapers on the Cape and New England Football Journal.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to include that in the description. I'll send you the link when I post it. I'm going to start editing after this, try and get it out, because I don't know how much more of our draft is going to take place tonight. So try and get it out before the real draft starts at pick 4, I guess. But thank you for coming on. It was great to have you. Like I said, we got you at the top of the wait list for our league, and we'd love to have you in. And we'd love to have you on any other time too. Maybe talk more fantasy football here. So thank you for coming on. Pete, George, you got anything else to say? All right, we'll leave it at that. Yeah, you guys stay on. We'll continue the rest of our show. But yeah, Tyler, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Yep, yeah, for sure, bro.
Definitely.
All right, that was Tyler Amaral.
Dude, he would have been 10 times better than Barron and Kyle.
No comment.
Whoa.
Yeah.
First of all, Pete, you're one of the worst fantasy football players
That's
in
staying
the
on the
fucking
show
league.
too. I'm not editing that out.
George,
No.
Barron and
Hold on.
Kyle
Pete,
have been on the clock
Pete,
for
Pete,
2 hours
Pete,
and 12
Pete,
minutes. Like, they need to
Pete,
pick Kenny Pickett.
Whoa.
Pete, you're
I
literally
know
one of
Slippery
the.
Pete's not criticizing people for taking their time, right?
Hold on. Pete, you're literally self-proclaimed one of the worst fantasy football players in the entire league. You've done research for 6 months. Now you think you're like a genius dynasty player. You haven't actually won any games or done anything productive. Why don't we see what you do in your 23 draft before we start talking about this guy would have been so much better than the other players that we had. You haven't done shit. You fucking learned about how to play dynasty 4 months ago. Now you call yourself an expert. Settle down, relax, stay in your lane, and then fucking maybe if you actually have something to back up your talk, then you could talk like you've actually accomplished something. But for somebody to be one of the worst teams in the league and then to come around and talk about this guy's be way better when you were just as bad, if not worse, in your first year playing dynasty as they have been. There's a learning curve. Half this league sucked when they came into it. Don't be talking shit when you literally don't know anything about these people.
He's making valid points, Pete. What are you gonna say back to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there is definitely a learning curve, and I sucked like badly in the first year. But I think I rode the learning curve quick, and I think I'm in a position to succeed in the future. So, I mean, I don't think the trades I made that put me in this hole was as bad as the decisions they made at that dispersal draft, but I get that you got to have your boys back, and I hope they're competitive in the future.
You also got to remember the pool of players that they were picking from. It's not wasn't necessarily easy to draft a good team out of that.
Yeah,
so
but Nick managed to do it somehow.
Nick drafted an okay team. Let's be real about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think, like realistically, I do think that in any bringing anybody into dynasty, like even if it was an open draft, the bad teams usually just draft players that are like older, like good players that are like they basically draft a redraft team and then they're fucked. So
That's
to have somebody to play, do a dynasty draft and be able to project dynasty value when they've never played and then do that within a dispersal context, I think is very challenging.
All right, yeah. I'll walk that comment back. I got you. I'll walk that comment back. I guess it was a little aggressive out of the gate.
I'd also like to just address Pete coming at Barron and Kyle, saying that they were on the clock for 2.5 hours, not like 35 minutes. But I also know that Slippery Pete, the guy that was really advocating for taking your time on the clock, making sure that you make the right choice. I find it interesting that you were coming at them for taking a lot of time on the clock.
This pick's a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer. Like, they should have known this pick last month. They should have known this pick the Thursday evening after the NFL draft when Kenny Pickett went 120 to the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a no-brainer. I think we kind of covered it talking about the big board. Pickett, I think that he has a decent floor, but I don't think it's insane for somebody to not love him as a prospect. I know that Barron and Kyle, they have a need at quarterback. They got to hope that Baker can kind of fall into a starting job this year. We'll see about that. But that was something I found interesting, right? We were talking about your mock draft. Let me pull it up. So obviously you had Pickett going 4. We'll see how that plays out. But like I said, I could also see them not going quarterback here and maybe grabbing one of these receivers if they really love them. I actually don't think that's the worst choice, right? If you really believe in Burks getting that AJ Brown workload or Garrett Wilson or whoever you want to rank, Jameson Williams, whoever you want to rank as this next wide receiver off the board, I don't think that that's the worst call to kind of go there, get youth out of position that we've seen can put up big numbers. Not the worst call. That's why I also thought it was interesting, right? You had Malik Willis at 111. I know that he's your guy, but I just think that that's kind of a bad dynasty pick. I think that Malik Willis should fall a little bit more in this draft just because of what we're looking at with his situation and his pathway to being a starter. I just think that taking him at 11, I think that Barron and Kyle, they'd be better off taking another receiver or maybe one of these running backs if they love them, and just trying to build out a younger team that way. But I mean, I think at 4, I do think Pickett's a solid pick just because of the need at quarterback. But let's maybe cool the Jets a little bit with calling him a no-brainer at 4, Pete. Okay?
I mean, it's not just a need at quarterback; it's a wasteland. They do not have one viable starter at QB. They've got 104 this year to get a QB. I guess they could take a guy like Corral, Ritter, like later this draft, but next year they have one pick in the first round. QBs are going to be flying off the board next year. They have to go after a quarterback this year and next year, and it's a no-brainer. Kenny Pickett, no-brainer. Like you've got a starting quarterback on a great team. He kind of fell to 1-4, I think, in my opinion. This is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer pick. Absolutely no-brainer. If they don't pick a quarterback here, they are literally banking that they nail a quarterback with their first-round pick next year, and then they still only have one quarterback.
Aren't you banking on nailing quarterback next year?
Yeah, but I have Deshaun Watson. Who do they have?
That actually brings up a question I have for you, right? So I was looking at this Trevor Bauer suspension. I don't know if you've heard about this, if you've seen the punishment that he's received, but he's been suspended for 2 full seasons, 2 full MLB seasons. He was being accused of similar degeneracy, right? He was choking a woman during sex. He was being very abusive, sexually abusive.
What do you mean similar? Similar to what?
The accusations.
Oh, okay. I thought you were trying to make a comparison over here. I was like, relax.
I did make a comparison.
Yeah, but I thought you were coming at me. I was like, are you kidding me right now?
No, I mean, you did make that comment about Jordan's future kids yesterday. But we'll leave it at that. So Trevor Bauer, he was suspended for 2 full seasons. Like I said, it was a similar situation where it was just, sexual degeneracy, sexual harassment, assault, whatever you want to call it. But he was never charged with anything either, much like Deshaun Watson wasn't. But do you fear that maybe the NFL is seeing MLB's suspension here 2 full seasons, and they might feel some pressure to match that?
No, anyone with a sports brain knows that the MLB commissioner and the entire office is a bunch of morons. From a marketing standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, from literally communication information, they are morons. I don't think the suspension transfers whatsoever. I am a little disappointed that civil lawsuits did not get settled this year. I wanted Watson to sit out this year. It would have helped my pick next year. It looks like he's going, if he does serve suspensions, it looks like it's going to be at the start of the 23 season, which.
So you wanted these accusations to be true to benefit your fantasy team?
No, I said if he is going to serve suspension games, I would rather for them preferred this year.
You're not afraid of the threat of them putting him on the exempt list?
They wouldn't.
I think it's a no.
They wouldn't do that. They would not.
I mean, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown was put on the exempt list.
If it was criminal charges, then absolutely. But the criminal cases got thrown out. It's just civil lawsuits now. So there's no shot.
They put Adrian Peterson on the exempt list.
Antonio Brown.
Yeah, because
exempt list. As a Patriots fan, you should know that this commissioner has complete and utter impunity in whatever he wants to do. And I think that given the league's history with domestic violence, their situation with women, their track record with women is very, very poor. I think that it's not out of the realm of possibilities that they go, let's just put this guy on the exempt list until all the dust settles, because worst case scenario for the league. And I don't know if they care. I think that's a good point that you bring up. Like, I don't know if they care, but I think it would be worst case scenario for the league if he plays an entire season, even potentially plays well. They start, promoting him again in, their primetime games or whatever the case may be. And then a year later, it turns out that it was all true. And they've basically been letting and promoting a guy that, has all these civil cases become true play. I don't know how that plays out for the league. I don't know if they want to let that scenario even play out, or if they just want to take it into their own hands and be like, let's just exempt list them until the dust settles.
Yeah, and like I said, I was just asking a question. If there is any fear that, kind of like how George touched on, and like I already said, where the NFL doesn't have the best track record with women, and the fact that the Trevor Bauer case is so fresh and so kind of similar to what we're seeing with Deshaun Watson, just in terms of the words that are being thrown around to describe the case, right?
It's not even close.
How is it not even close?
Trevor Bauer,
Deshaun Watson was worse.
Proven guilty.
Trevor Bauer was not guilty. Trevor Bauer was not accused. Was not convicted of anything. That's why I'm saying it's a similar case, because he had similar accusations as far as sexual assault or whatever the proper term is for it.
But he was
not convicted of anything either.
What? Concrete proof of that stuff.
No, there's like text messages. There's text messages for Deshaun Watson too.
He literally had his criminal case thrown out of jail, thrown out of court. The exempt list is not.
And what happened to Trevor Bauer's case?
The most I see, and I don't fear it, but it's I don't know, anywhere from like 1 to maybe a half a season suspension of games. which doesn't really matter anyway, because I got my eyes set on the 2024 playoffs, and that's really what it's all about for Slippery Pete.
You said one or a half or 1.5?
It could be one game, it could be 4 games, it could be 8 games, it could be 9 games, it could be 16 games. I don't know.
That was my question.
That's not my decision.
And look
But
at
I
how
don't fear.
defensive you're getting.
I don't
And that was
fear.
my question.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm being drawn, like I'm supporting him in his actions. No, I manage him.
Kind of are.
on
You're getting so
No,
defensive.
you
All I
actually-
asked you,
yeah,
and you just
No,
answered my
I manage
question.
him on my team. On my team. If he's on the football field, he's going to be in Slippery Pete's starting roster. That's what matters.
I don't
You
think
said
anybody was
that you
asking
wish you said that you hope that his cases would get. You actually literally were like, I wish that they had just found him guilty already, so he can get suspended
So
or
you
we
can
can
get a
get this
better
thing
pick.
over with.
Well,
You
he's not going to
literally,
be found
like,
guilty. If he settles, then maybe he'll
you like
serve.
casually brushed it off. Like, I hope this fucking rain passes. I hope that he just can quickly they can quickly find out that he did all these horrible things to women, so he can just get a suspension over with and start playing again for my fantasy team.
You know
I'm
what?
gonna need him for
I-
this 24 run.
Yeah, no, I see the point you guys are making. Maybe I'll put him on the Slippery Pete exempt list and bench him for the 20.
Nobody's asking you to do that. My question was simply, do you fear that the NFL might feel pressured to match or attempt to match the Trevor Bauer suspension based on the
No.
similarity in their cases, the fact that they were accused of similar things and that neither of them were convicted of anything. Their cases were thrown out. That is similar. Those are facts. So do you just fear that the NFL might feel pressure to do so? That is my only question.
I don't fear it. The decision's out of my hands. If he's playing on the football field, he's going to be in Slippery Pete's roster.
All right, you're dodging the question, but that's okay. It's okay. Let's get on. I just got a few notes on your mock draft. So 108, you had Chris Olave going. I think that's a fine pick. Like we've said about the receivers, they could kind of go anywhere in that range, and you could kind of rank them anywhere. One thing I found interesting, you said that DJ Moore can go for 20 to 30 points any given week. So I thought that was interesting, right? I checked the stats. In 63 career games, he only has 4 games of 20 plus points, career high of 28.4. He's never actually touched 30. Kendrick Bourne. So last year, DJ Moore had 120-point game. I think it was against Dallas. He finished kind of in that mid-20s range. Kendrick Bourne had 2 20-plus point games last year compared to DJ Moore's 1. I just thought that was interesting, but I also thought it could open the floor for a discussion on DJ Moore. I think he's a consistent wide receiver too, but I think he's constantly talked about as like a top 5, and maybe he gets bumped down a little bit just with some of the rookie receivers that came in last year and how everything's always changing, but he's always talked about so highly in dynasty circles, but he hasn't actually done it yet. I believe the talent's there. Maybe he does just need a good quarterback to take him over the edge, but he hasn't done it yet. And we're in like year 4 or 5 now. So I do just get a little iffy on that. Pete, what's your response to my note? And also, where do you stand on DJ Moore?
I mean, I don't know. Pulling one stat out of a mock is like kind of throwing stones at a glass house. But
I just said I had a few notes on your mock. Was
yeah,
that not
I
on
mean, you
the
said what,
was that not on the
4
agenda for the show? Talk about your mock draft.
You said he's done it 4 times in 62 games. I mean,
63 career games.
63. Yeah, he can do it any given week.
I guess. He's got like a 5% chance maybe to do it.
In all honesty, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the talent is there to hit that production, but he hasn't had the quarterback to do it.
That's basically what I said. That's kind of tightening it up a little bit. But yeah, I think he's a good receiver, but all he's ever been is a wide receiver too. And he's constantly talked about as like a dynasty must have. I just think, all due respect to him, I do think that he's a good receiver, but I just think, sometimes people need to take a step back. I think the dynasty community gets a little overreactive. I did once have a kid, Nick Pio, once told me that Juju Smith was a top 5 dynasty asset. Let's just talk about this. This guy, he works for a fantasy company, moron. But whatever, I noticed that I tend to be right on things like that.
It's only funny because I know.
Oh, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. Idiot, great guy.
I would definitely say that DJ Moore's quarterback situation has been snake bitten.
Yeah, for sure. But it's just, it's like at some point, it's like, what are you going to do?
Hold on, wait.
Right?
George is making sure I use the term right.
All right, moving on though. Like I said, the pick I had no problem with Olave. I think it's a great pick. I like Olave a lot. I'd love to get him. I think getting him at 1.8 would be fantastic value. The next one, we kind of covered. It wasn't really a criticism at all. I just liked, and we already talked about it, but James Cook, I still think at least year one, he might be more complimentary to Singletary, but like George said, it's not necessarily hard to beat out Devin Singletary. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that pans out, but we covered it. We don't got to do it again. We covered Malik. Pete obviously doesn't want to back down, say maybe he was a little too bullish on him, but that's all right. It's all right. You like your guy. Hopefully you can get him. You should be able to get him in the third round. Yeah, George, we'll wrap in 2 seconds. I just also had a question for you, Pete. I feel like we didn't really get into comparison too much here. Like I said, not a criticism. I'm just interested in your opinion on Sky Moore and Christian Watson. So with Moore, you said he's coming in, right? No Tyreek Hill. You said absolutely no way Sky will fill these shoes, talking about Hills. But you did say he can contribute immediately. With Watson, you said in theory, Watson steps in as the new Devontae Adams, could make an instant impact, kind of a similar content to Sky Moore or comment about Sky Moore. But you still had Moore over Watson. So I'm just interested in why you had it that way. Just based on your comments.
I had Moore over Watson because of body of work. Watson had 1 year at NDSU, I think, as like a great wide receiver. The first 3 years for that, he didn't do trash. I think I have that right. I think he only had 1 year body of work.
Probably.
I don't think he steps into that Devontae Adams role, but I wrote that piece kind of saying that's what I think people are going. I think that's what people are thinking.
Yeah,
I kind of loved how Tyler didn't even have him on his top 15. But yeah, that's why I went Sky Moore over Watson because of the body of work Sky Moore has. But I also am not too high on Sky Moore because we've never seen a wide receiver 2 out of Kansas City do well. And I mean, now it's like Kelsey is the number 1 target, right? And then you got Juju, Mecole, Josh Gordon's still there, and Sky. So like maybe one of these 4 jump up, but I kind of just feel like they're all going to get 10-15% of the pie. And I'm not really high on Watson or Moore, to be honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting year for Kansas City. Kind of see how things shake out. Like I was saying, with Tyreek being gone, it could just change the offense, and maybe we don't see that wide receiver 2 problem anymore. But as always, I like to actually see it kind of before. I don't like to count my chickens before they hatch or anything. We'll end with a question I got for George. So one name that we didn't talk about much or at all when going over the big board was Brian Robinson. Ron Rivera, he spoke on Brian Robinson. He expressed a desire to have a Gibson Robinson timeshare, kind of similar to Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. Obviously, those guys, they thrived. I'd say there were like 3 years where they were like really, really good together. And then there was like another 4 years where, they were still a very good tandem. They were just getting older, how running backs age. So obviously, if that were to happen, I think you'd be all right with having at least one half of that duo. But do you maybe feel like you might have overpaid a little bit in hindsight when it comes to Antonio Gibson?
It's a great question, Katie.
It is
to go over. You gave up the 7th overall pick of this year's draft, the 12th overall pick, and then your 2023 first, which I project to be top 6.
Oh, God, I mean, come on. No. That's 10, 11. That's 10, 11, or 12.
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, I think the answer is that potentially, yes, we overpaid for Gibson. I think that's true. I think we overpaid for him at the time of acquisition. I think that like we objectively overpaid for him. I think the more interesting question then was like, what, was it worth the overpay? I think for what we were trying to do at the time, and he didn't end up really contributing to us winning, but at the time, we weren't going to win unless we added it back. And we had a team that was in a position to win a championship, and our thinking was that all the picks don't matter if you don't end up winning. So that was really our rationale behind overpaying for him. So I think, yes, objectively, we overpaid for him, and it could end up not being that great of a decision for us. But ultimately, the goal was to hopefully we can bring him in and he helps us win. And at that point, we felt that was more important than the picks that we had. So
yeah, I looked at
yes and no.
Yeah, so I looked at the stats, right, and he played for there were 4 weeks after the trade deadline that you guys had him for the regular season. And he was, when you really break it down, right, for 2021 overall, he averaged 13.0 points per game. That puts him at RB19. In those 4 weeks that he did play for you guys in the regular season, he averaged 12.75. So that's RB20. So I'd say in the short term, right, you paid for exactly who you got exactly who you paid for, price aside, right? But it will be interesting because I think that you guys are also kind of paying for him with the expectation that he might transform into something more, and he still might. I mean, there's really no reason to believe that he won't, right? It's not like Brian Robinson was. It's not like they drafted Brees Hall or Kenneth Walker or something. Brian Robinson's still a little bit later on in the draft. He's not necessarily a lock to pan out, and I don't think he's the complete back that Gibson is, but I do think it's interesting that they're bringing him in and they clearly have some type of plan with him. But yeah, it's like you said. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? I didn't really compare. I didn't really look too deep into the regular season matchups. I mean, he had a 20-point game. He had a 19.6-point game. So you could argue that he probably did help you guys out as far as getting seeding. He didn't play for you guys at all in the playoffs, so he didn't quite literally didn't help you guys win in the playoffs. But at the same time, who knows? I mean, those are too big, right? I mean, I know that I was offering you Cordarrelle Patterson for much cheaper at the time, but when you look at how Cordarrelle played, he was not playing well down that stretch, and that difference in points might have, gotten you guys out of the 1 seed, might not have given you guys the same pathway to the championship, and then who knows? But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to look at, right? Like I said, 7th pick, 12th pick, and then being generous, we'll call it next year's 8th pick or something, right? So we'll see how that pans out. We'll see who even gets taken with these 7th and 12th picks, and then obviously next year it's another thing that we could always look back on. But yeah, I mean, we could leave it at that. I feel like we covered a lot of things. We covered the draft. We a little bit. We covered the big board. We are 52 minutes away from our overnight pause. So I don't know if we're going to get a 4th pick in today, but hopefully we can knock out a good chunk of the draft, throughout the day tomorrow. We start back at 8 a.m. We want to thank Tyler Amaral for coming on. I'll plug all his stuff in the description of the YouTube and on the blog. Slippery Pete, George, you guys got any parting comments?
George, maybe you could have gone more aggressive after a guy like Joe Mixon last year. Just maybe something to think about next time.
Dude, you fucking snaked me out of Joe Mixon. Just shut the fuck up, man. I mean, the thing about fucking Pete is that like he's a rat, and then just bring it up over and over and over again. Like you snaked me out of Joe Mixon, and then you want to be like, oh, you should have been more aggressive with Joe Mixon. Shut the
George,
fuck up.
come on. It's the end of the epi. Don't let me get you hot. The end of the epi.